The faint clink of wine glasses still echoed, my daughter-in-law's laughter sharp above it. Still, I didn't move, just straightened the napkins, letting her words, just the help, slide over me. As the scent of lemon polish filled the kitchen, it traced every slight, every hidden disdain tied to family ties. While it lingered, I felt a quiet clarity bloom. The house, the trust, my role. All misjudged by blood, not merit. The same rhythm whispered that they assumed I would stay submissive forever. That's when I drafted the notice of severance and let the envelope rewrite our relationship. All right, before we dive into this crazy story, do me a favor. Subscribe and tell us where you're watching from. The air inside the Hale house smelled of buttercream and balloon latex. 8-year-old Callie darted between legs, her party dress a blur of pink tulle, chasing a ribbon that trailed from one of the helium balloons brushing the ceiling. Parents crowded the kitchen island, laughing too loudly, holding stemless wine glasses that clinked over the music. Ginny Hale stood at the far end of the counter, quietly steadying a tray of lemonade. Her nails, short and pale, clicked once against the glass pitcher as she poured. She had done this kind of thing all her life, refilling, arranging, staying 2 steps ahead of a spill. The habit stuck even now, though no one had asked. "Those cupcakes are from Dallas," Tessa announced proudly, brushing a hand through her honey blonde hair. "Custom fondant, each one hand-painted, totally worth the price." Ginny smiled faintly, adjusting a stack of paper napkins shaped like sunflowers. Her wrists ached, but she didn't let it show. A woman in a navy sweater pointed toward her. "You're so lucky, Tessa, to have such wonderful help today." Tessa's laugh came sharp and bright, carrying over the hum of conversation. "Oh, that's not the caterer," she said, waving her wine glass. "That's just Eric's mom. She lives here. Kind of like the help." Laughter rippled around the island. Someone said, "How convenient." Another chimed in, "Built-in childcare." Ginny froze for a fraction of a second. Her eyes stayed on the knife she was using to cut another slice of cake, making sure the frosting line stayed clean. She placed it on a plate, set a fork beside it, and smiled at the next guest in line. "Would you like a corner piece?" she asked softly. Her voice never trembled. From the patio, someone called for more napkins. Ginny moved automatically, the way she did when she was still married, and people expected grace no matter what was said. She took a slow breath, inhaling the sugar-heavy air, and carried the napkins outside. Callie tugged her sleeve. "Grandma, did you see me blow out all the candles?" "I did," Ginny said, smoothing a stray hair from the child's forehead. "You made a perfect wish face." Callie grinned, unaware of the tension thickening behind the kitchen windows. When the party wound down, confetti clung to the carpet, and plastic cups gathered on every surface. Guests trickled out with polite goodbyes, some hugging Tessa, others nodding to Ginny as if she were staff. Tessa didn't look at her once. Eric kissed his mother's cheek absent-mindedly on his way upstairs with Callie's new toys. "Thanks for everything, Mom," he murmured. "You really outdid yourself." "Always happy to help," she said. The door closed behind them. Silence seeped into the house, the kind that hums after long noise, settling in layers. Ginny crossed the spotless kitchen, her steps slow, deliberate. The counters gleamed. The smell of frosting still lingered, cloying. She picked up a stray ribbon from the floor and coiled it neatly before tossing it into the trash. Then she turned toward the back hallway, the one leading to her suite. Her heels clicked once against the tile before she slipped them off, walking barefoot on the soft rug she'd chosen herself when the suite was built. She'd written the check for it too, $148,000, made from the life insurance her husband left her. Inside her sitting room, the air was cooler. Everything here was in its place. The tea set by the window, The narrow bookshelf holding cookbooks and files, the framed photo of her late husband smiling on their old porch in Tyler. Ginny set the kettle to boil and peeled off her disposable serving gloves. They made a faint snap as they landed in the trash. Steam rose, fogging the glass above the sink. When the water began to hum, she poured it into her favorite cup, a chipped porcelain mug with blue cornflowers, and sat down at her writing desk. Beneath the soft lamplight rested a thick leather binder, tabbed and labeled in her handwriting. She flipped it open. A title page stared up at her. Joint Ownership Agreement, 2018. Her fingertip traced the embossed date. She remembered the notary's office, the signatures, the promise of family harmony that came with shared property. The house had always been hers more than anyone's, but she'd let them believe otherwise. Outside, the last of the guests' SUVs rumbled away. The porch light switched off. Ginny lifted her tea, took a slow sip, and smiled into the quiet. She'd been called the help. Maybe it was time to start helping in a way her daughter-in-law would never forget. Morning light slanted through the blinds of Ginny's suite, thin and silvery, dust motes spinning in the quiet. The house upstairs was still. No thump of Callie's footsteps, no coffee grinder sputter. It was the hour when the world hadn't decided what kind of day it wanted to be. Ginny sat at her desk, the binder open where she'd left it. The words, Joint Ownership Agreement, 2018 looked sharper in daylight, less sentimental than she remembered. She reached for her reading glasses, the pair with the tortoiseshell frames, and started turning pages. Legal phrases rose like ghosts she'd half forgotten. Title held jointly, proportional investment. Subdivision permitted upon dispute. She'd skimmed it when Jude Castillo first drafted it 7 years ago, trusting her son's smile more than the ink. Now she read every line, slowly. Her phone buzzed against the table. Jude Castillo, the screen read. She picked up. Virginia Hale, came his even voice, the kind of professional calm that could steady a witness stand. I looked through the records. You still own 49% of the property. The remainder's split between Eric and Tessa, jointly. Ginny let that settle. 49, she repeated. You never refinanced after you built the guest suite, Jude continued. Technically, that suite and part of the main house sit under your name. They'd have to buy you out to change that. Her lips curved, faint and knowing. They didn't read it, did they? A pause. Then, if they did, they assumed you wouldn't. Ginny almost smiled. And that's where they made their first mistake. She thanked him and hung up. The phone lay quiet beside her cup, the tea long gone cold. Outside, sunlight sharpened on the backyard fence. Tall, stained cedar panels she'd paid to have installed. Ginny slipped on her shoes and stepped outside. The air carried that suburban hum of sprinklers, mowers, and faintly burnt toast. She walked the perimeter slowly, the way her late husband used to check their property lines, one hand brushing the fence as if it might tell her secrets. From the Hales' upstairs window, a pale curtain fluttered. Tessa's silhouette passed by, fast, distracted, already in motion toward another busy day of errands and optics. Ginny didn't wave. Margot Dunn's voice floated from the adjoining yard. Morning, Gin. Ginny turned. Margot was kneeling beside her azalea bushes, gloved hands deep in soil, a visor shading her eyes. Morning, Ginny said. Margot gave her a look that was half amusement, half inquiry. Heard the party was something. Cake, wine, laughter. Those HOA ladies get tipsy enough to forget who bought their houses. Ginny didn't answer right away. She leaned on the fence rail, watching a line of ants carry crumbs toward a crack in the patio. She called me the help, Ginny said finally. Margot stilled. You're kidding. Ginny shook her head once. Margot pulled off a glove, her voice lower. She better hope you don't act like it. That earned a small laugh. Soft, real, the kind Ginny hadn't made in a while. "I won't," she said. "I'll act like what I am." Margot tilted her head. "And what's that?" "Owner?" Ginny replied simply. When she went back inside, the kitchen gleamed with its usual order. But she didn't stop there this time. She went to the fireproof cabinet near her desk, the one labeled House and Legacy. From the back folder, she pulled out a crisp, folded paper. Her bank's certified copy of the original check she'd written 7 years ago, $148,000, the exact amount her husband's policy had yielded after the funeral expenses. She remembered standing at the bank counter, pen trembling slightly as she endorsed it. She hadn't thought of it as leverage then. Just love. A home for her son's family. Now, looking at the figure, the date, the notation, investment in construction, guest suite addition, it read more like a deed of intent. Ginny placed the paper beside the binder. The numbers, the ink, the signatures, facts didn't lie. People did. From upstairs, she heard the faint creak of floorboards. Tessa's heels, quick and decisive, the sound of a life too confident in its own security. Ginny closed the binder gently, her thumb resting on the title. Her reflection in the glossy cover looked composed, even kind, but her eyes had shifted, measured, awake, calculating in the quiet way women learn to be when apologies stop working. She whispered to the empty room, "You should have read the fine print, sweetheart." The kettle clicked off behind her, loud in the stillness. Rain drummed softly against the kitchen windows, the kind that comes without thunder, steady, polite, cleansing. Ginny liked mornings like this. The house always went quieter, the world a little more honest when no one wanted to go outside. She sat at her desk again, a cup of cinnamon tea cooling beside the binder that had become her new gospel. The pages still smelled faintly of ink and dust, the kind of paper that carried weight. She slipped her finger under a tab marked Clauses, Special Conditions, and began to read with the patience of someone unearthing buried treasure. There it was, printed cleanly in the middle of a paragraph she'd never thought to examine. Section 3.7, Reclamation Rights. Her eyes followed the fine print. In the event of derogatory or demeaning treatment by co-occupants, the undersigned retains the right to reclaim and restrict access to any jointly used spaces within the property until dispute resolution or title separation. Ginny blinked once, twice. The word settled deep. Derogatory or demeaning treatment. She didn't have to stretch far to meet that definition. She reached for her notepad, the same lined pad she used for grocery lists and Christmas planning, and wrote it carefully in her looping script, just the help. She drew a line under it, slowly, the way one signs a quiet declaration of war. Her phone sat beside her mug. For a moment she stared at it, the screen black and reflective. Then she tapped out a message to Jude. "Need your professional eyes on clause 3.7, confidential." Within minutes, 3 dots pulsed in reply. "Reviewing now." That clause was your husband's idea, wasn't it? Smart man. "You want me to prepare a draft?" "Internal only. For now." Ginny typed back. "Yes. Call it a notice of severance. Hypothetical. Understood. I'll keep it clean and quiet. Need a secondary witness?" She thought of Margot, of her neighbor's level gaze and steady voice, a woman who never gossiped but never missed a thing. Ginny smiled to herself. Margot Dunn. Trustworthy. Perfect. I'll draft it tonight. No filings yet, just structure. Ginny set the phone down, her pulse a calm, deliberate rhythm. She wasn't angry, not in the fiery, shouting sense. What she felt was sharper, cooler, the kind of clarity that comes right before you put a blade to rope. She closed the binder, her palm resting on its cover like a benediction. Upstairs, faint footsteps crossed the hallway. Tessa's rhythm again, the hurried clack of a woman forever running late to something that didn't matter. Ginny listened, her head tilted slightly as though committing the sound to memory. Every echo had a purpose now. The rain picked up. She went to the window and watched it wash the patio clean. Beyond the fence, Margot's dog was chasing puddles, leash trailing behind like a flag of defiance. Margot herself appeared a moment later in her yellow raincoat, waving once through the drizzle. Ginny raised a hand back, her smile knowing. Tomorrow, she'd ask her friend to witness a signature. Nothing dramatic. Just insurance for the future. Her phone buzzed again. A text from Eric this time. "Great party, Mom. Everyone had fun. Thanks for everything." She stared at it, thumb hovering above the screen. The message felt like a paper bandage on a wound he hadn't seen. Her reply came easy. "Always happy to help?" She set the phone face down. The word help looked heavier now, like a code she'd decided to break. The kettle began to whistle again in the background, a faithful sound she'd come to associate with turning points. Ginny reached into the drawer beside her desk, pulled out her old fountain pen, and uncapped it. The nib gleamed faintly under the desk lamp. On the last page of her notepad, she wrote a list. Short, precise. Clause 37. Validated. Witness. Margot Dunn. Draft. Notice of severance. Timeline. Indefinite. Motive. Respect. She drew another neat line beneath it, the ink pooling slightly at the end. The house gave a soft creak in the silence, the way old homes do when they feel a shift. Ginny looked up, letting the sound linger. "Permission granted," she murmured to herself. By Thursday, the rhythm of the house had changed. It was subtle at first, the kind of difference only the observant would catch. The scent of lemon polish no longer greeted the morning. The white hand towels in the downstairs bathroom stayed slightly damp from last night's guests. The counters gleamed less, and the recycling bin filled quicker than usual. Ginny noticed it all, of course. She always had. But this time, she didn't fix it. Her mornings were now her own. Tea in the garden, pruning her potted mint, sorting through her late husband's old watch collection. She walked past the open kitchen and the smudge on the refrigerator handle without pausing. It was almost meditative, each restraint a small rebellion, one quiet refusal at a time. Tessa noticed by the second day. "Hey, Ginny," she called, her tone falsely sweet as she entered the kitchen in gym clothes. "The dishwasher didn't get run last night. Thought you might have forgotten." Ginny looked up from her mug of tea. "Did I?" Her voice was calm, curious. "Well, yeah," Tessa said, opening the door and frowning at the unwashed dishes. "Guess we all got busy." Ginny smiled, a polite, almost grandmotherly expression. "Yes, we did." She took another sip, eyes steady over the rim of her cup. The next morning, a stack of folded towels appeared on the counter. Sloppy, uneven. Tessa's version of help. Later that afternoon, Ginny found a note on the whiteboard by the fridge. "Remember to wipe counters after cooking. XO. Tessa." Ginny erased it without a word. By Sunday, Tessa was pacing, muttering to Eric in the hall. "Your mom's on some kind of strike," she hissed. "This house doesn't run itself." Eric sighed. "She's retired, Tess. Maybe just let her be." "Let her be? She lives here rent-free." Ginny, from her suite, heard every word through the vent. She smiled faintly and clicked her pen open, flipping to the new page of her notepad. The ink bled a steady blue line as she wrote. Subject, behavioral shift, cause, self-respect. That night she opened her will. The folder had been untouched for years, a relic from calmer times. Her husband's neat handwriting marked the original signatures. The page listing secondary beneficiaries had once included Tessa's name beside a modest financial allotment. Ginny read it once more, slowly, then drew a single line through it. Revoked. In its place, she wrote, "To Callie, my granddaughter. everything of sentimental value and legacy significance. Her pen pressed a little deeper into the paper. She could almost feel her husband's quiet approval echo through the ink. The next morning, Margot stopped by with her usual thermos of black coffee. The two women sat under Ginny's covered patio, rainwater still dripping from the gutters. "You've gone quiet," Margot observed, sipping. "I've gone busy," Ginny corrected. "Different kind of work now." Margot's eyes twinkled. "You're witnessing them adjust to the absence of your free labor. The shock's the worst part." Ginny chuckled, low and soft. "They'll adapt. People always do when the help stops helping." Through the open door, they could hear Tessa's voice calling from the kitchen, sharp with irritation. "Ginny, do you know where the bleach spray went?" Ginny didn't answer. Margot's eyebrows lifted. "She's asking you," Margot said. "I heard," Ginny replied. "I'm just not available." By dinner time, tension had settled over the house like humidity. The dining table was set for three: Eric, Tessa, and Callie. Ginny's usual seat at the end remained empty, untouched. From her suite, she could smell the grilled chicken, the faint bite of rosemary. She could hear the small talk, the clink of silverware, the practiced laughter of people pretending everything was normal. Then came a softer sound. Tiny footsteps. Callie appeared in the doorway, her pink socks silent on the hardwood. "Grandma," she whispered, "why don't you sit with us at dinner anymore?" Ginny set down her pen and turned in her chair. The girl's eyes were wide and honest, unaware of the games adults played around her. Ginny smiled and drew her close, pressing a kiss to her forehead. "Sometimes," she said quietly. "Quiet is the loudest seat in the house." Callie didn't understand, not yet, but she nodded anyway. "Can I eat dessert with you instead?" Ginny brushed a lock of hair behind her ear. "Always." Later, when the house had gone still again, she returned to her desk. The binder was closed, the will sealed in its folder. Her reflection in the window looked composed, but her eyes carried something sharper now. Resolve tempered by patience. She turned off the lamp, whispering into the dimness. "Let's see how long before they notice the real cleanup's begun." By the following week, the air in the Hale household had changed texture. It wasn't just tension, it was precision. Ginny's silence no longer felt passive, it felt procedural. She moved like a woman keeping appointments no one else knew existed. Breakfasts came and went without her in attendance. Packages arrived by courier, slim envelopes sealed in manila, addressed to her suite. When Tessa asked, "What's all that paperwork?" Ginny only smiled and said, "Housekeeping." On Tuesday morning, Ginny drove to downtown Plano in her silver Buick, the one her husband had bought her before he passed. The city offices were already humming when she parked under the overhang and stepped out with her folder tucked under one arm. Jude Castillo was waiting inside, crisp in his navy suit, his expression unreadable. He led her to a conference room with walls the color of muted sand. "Everything's in order," he said, laying out 2 sheets of paper. "Notice of property division under your clause 3.7. It doesn't start a war, it just draws a border." Ginny adjusted her glasses, scanning each line. She paused on the phrase, "Request for relocation, 90 days from receipt." Her finger tapped the margin once, twice. "She won't see it coming." Jude's lips curved slightly. "Most people don't when they never read what they signed." Ginny signed the line with her usual grace, deliberate, cursive, steady. The pen barely scratched the paper. When she left the building, the morning had turned clear. Sunlight glanced off glass and chrome, glinting on car hoods. She walked to her car without looking back, her binder heavier but her heart lighter. That night, as she poured herself tea, the house trembled faintly with laughter from the upstairs TV. A sitcom, Tessa's favorite. The kind with canned applause after every punchline. Ginny stirred her honey slowly and murmured to the empty room, "We'll see who's laughing soon enough." 2 days later, it arrived. The letter came in a cream envelope embossed with Jude's law firm logo, Castillo and Baines, PLLC. It was addressed jointly to Eric and Tessa Hale. Tessa had just come back from Pilates, her hair still damp, when she found it on the counter. "What's this?" she asked, waving it. Eric shrugged. "Probably another HOA update." She tore it open, eyes scanning fast, then slowing, then freezing. "What the hell is this?" Eric turned, startled. "What?" "It says, Notice of Property Division. Request for relocation within 90 days. She looked up, voice rising. "This says we have to move." Ginny, from her suite, heard the paper crinkle and smiled without looking up from her crossword. Eric read over Tessa's shoulder. "Wait, this is from Mom's lawyer?" His face drained. "That can't be right." Tessa's laugh came high and sharp, edged with panic. "She's not serious. She can't be serious." "She wouldn't," Eric said, though he didn't sound convinced. "Oh, she would." Tessa dropped the letter onto the counter as if it burned. "Your mother's gone senile. That's the only explanation." From her suite, Ginny rose quietly, refilled her kettle, and began preparing tea. She could hear their voices climbing through the hallway, brittle with disbelief. Tessa's footsteps stormed closer. "Ginny." Ginny turned as the younger woman appeared in the doorway, cheeks flushed, letter in hand. "What is this?" Tessa demanded, shaking the paper. Ginny adjusted her glasses, utterly calm. "That's correspondence from my attorney." "You can't evict us. This is our house." Ginny's tone stayed even. "It's our house. 49% mine, last I checked." Eric appeared behind Tessa, hands half raised in a peace gesture. "Mom, what's going on?" Ginny poured boiling water over her tea bag, the steam rising between them like a curtain. "A simple formality. You should have read the agreement before moving in. It grants me rights under— How does it phrase it, Jude?" "Ah, yes. Derogatory treatment by co-occupants." Tessa blinked. "You're doing this over a joke?" Ginny smiled softly. "That depends on who's laughing." Eric rubbed his temple. "Mom, please. Let's just talk about this." "Oh, I think the talking phase has expired," Ginny said, lifting her cup. 90 days, if I recall." The silence that followed was taut enough to hum. Tessa's voice cracked the stillness. "You can't do this. We'll fight it." Ginny looked at her steadily. "You can't contest what you never read." From the doorway behind them came a familiar voice. "That's true," Jude said, stepping inside, briefcase in hand. "Everything's legally sound. Filed, sealed, and notarized." Tessa spun toward him. "You helped her?" He didn't flinch. "I work for whoever signs the checks, Mrs. Hale." Ginny sipped her tea, calm as the eye of a storm. "More tea, Jude?" He smiled. "Thank you, but I'll pass. I should leave the family to adjust." When he was gone, Tessa stood rigid, clutching the letter like a verdict. Eric stared at the floor, torn between guilt and exhaustion. Ginny turned toward the window, watching the reflection of their pale faces in the glass. Margot's voice drifted faintly from outside the fence, calling her dog. "She mistook the matriarch for a maid," Margot murmured when she caught Ginny's eye. "Not a mistake you make twice." Ginny's mouth lifted just slightly. "No," she agreed. "You only get to make that one once." The house had gone unnaturally still after the shouting. For the first time in years, even the walls seemed unsure which side they were on. Ginny stood by the kitchen sink, rinsing her teacup, the steady rhythm of running water cutting through the silence. Outside, the late afternoon sun spilled gold across the countertops, catching the edges of the cream envelope that still lay crumpled near the fruit bowl. A light knock came at the open doorframe. "Mom?" Eric's voice, soft, uncertain. Ginny turned, drying her hands on a dish towel. "Come in, Eric." He hesitated before stepping fully into the kitchen, like a boy called to the principal's office. The letter was still clenched in his hand, its folds sharp and angry. "I didn't want it to go this way," he said. "Tessa's just upset. You blindsided her." Ginny moved with quiet precision, reaching for the kettle on the stove. "Upset people often are, when paperwork catches up to behavior." He sighed. "She was joking, Mom. You know how she gets when she's trying to be funny." Ginny's hand didn't pause. The whistle of the kettle began to rise, low and steady. "So is this relocation," she said lightly. "Legally speaking." Eric blinked, confused. "What?" She turned off the flame, poured the steaming water over 2 tea bags in porcelain cups. "It's hypothetical. A procedural exercise, if you will." Just like her joke. He ran a hand through his hair. "Mom, this isn't you. You're not like this." Ginny looked at him then. Really looked. "You mean, not assertive? Not the kind of woman who defends her own name?" He opened his mouth, then closed it again. "I mean you don't pick fights." "I didn't," she said, sliding a cup toward him. "I responded." For a moment they just stood there, the faint clink of spoons stirring sugar the only sound between them. Eric stared at his tea as if it might explain how the ground had shifted beneath his feet. Ginny reached for a folder on the counter and opened it with deliberate calm. Inside were neatly arranged pages, copies, notarized and color-coded with small sticky tabs. She laid them out like a dealer revealing cards. The joint ownership agreement, the Clause 3.7 excerpt, and finally, the notice of property division. "These are your mother's receipts," she said, tone mild. "Everything above board." Eric looked down at the documents, his face paling. "I didn't even know this clause existed." "Your wife didn't either," Ginny said. "I assumed she handled the paperwork, given her enthusiasm for running the household." "That's not fair." "It's factual." He exhaled, rubbing his temples. "So, what happens now?" Ginny took her seat at the kitchen island, the same one where she'd served cake and lemonade a week ago. "That depends on how she wishes to proceed. There are options: sale, relocation, or perhaps formal tenancy." Eric's eyebrows drew together. "Tenancy? You mean rent?" Ginny nodded once, serene. "As I said, options." He slumped back in his chair, staring at the stack of papers as though they might rearrange themselves into something kinder. "Where would we even go?" Ginny's answer came gently, almost kind. "That's up to your wife." He looked at her then, really looked, and for the first time, he seemed to see the steel beneath the softness, the tidy binder, the unshaken teacup, the woman who had quietly built the house brick by brick and now intended to reclaim it. "You really mean to do this?" he said quietly. Ginny sipped her tea, steady. "Eric, I meant to build a home. The rest is logistics." He swallowed hard, standing. "She's going to lose it when she realizes you're serious." "She already has," Ginny said. He hesitated in the doorway, letter still crushed in his fist. "What do I tell Callie?" Ginny looked out the window where the swing in the yard moved slightly in the breeze. "Tell her grandma's just making sure everyone knows whose house it really is." He left without replying. The floor creaked under his retreating steps, then silence again. Clean, unhurried, unbroken. Ginny gathered the papers, slid them neatly back into their folder, and placed it beside the cooling kettle. Her pulse never wavered. From outside, Margot's voice floated through the open window. "You all right over there, Gin?" Ginny smiled faintly, eyes still on the door where her son had stood. "Perfectly fine, Margot. Just pouring tea without shaking." For a few blissful days, the Hale house played at normalcy. Tessa greeted Ginny with an almost brittle cheerfulness, compliments on her garden, small talk about the weather, offers of coffee that came too sweet, too forced. But Ginny had lived through enough PTA fundraisers and condolence luncheons to recognize counterfeit kindness when she saw it. It smelled faintly of desperation. On Thursday morning, while checking her email, Ginny's phone buzzed with a notification from the neighborhood Facebook group. One she rarely opened except to see when the HOA planned its next overreach. The post was from Tessa Hale. Does anyone know a good cleaning service? Ours seems to have lost interest. Funny how some people forget gratitude when they've been given everything. Family drama. Suburban problems. Ginny stared at it for a long moment, the faint tick of the kitchen clock marking the seconds between anger and action. She didn't respond. She didn't even blink. She just took a screenshot. Then another, in case Tessa deleted it. Then she forwarded it to Jude with the subject line, "For your pattern of hostility file." 5 minutes later, his reply came. "Got it. That'll pair nicely with the verbal statement from the party. Keep documenting." Quietly, Ginny closed her phone and took a long breath. The kettle clicked behind her. She poured herself tea. Steady hands, unbroken calm. In the reflection of the window above the sink, she could see the backyard. Callie chasing bubbles with her friend from next door, hair flying in the sun, a slice of joy untouched by adult war. Later, as the school bus idled at the curb, Callie ran back to her grandmother for a hug. Her backpack bounced against her small shoulders, her smile bright enough to soften anything except resolve. "You're still staying, right, Grandma?" Ginny bent to her height, smoothing a wrinkle from the girl's jacket. "Of course I am, sweetheart." "For how long?" Ginny's voice was gentle, her eyes steady. "As long as my name's on the house." Callie's head tilted, confusion creasing her brow. But she smiled anyway and squeezed tighter before running off to the bus. Ginny watched the doors close, the diesel hum fading down the street. Then she turned back toward the house, her face settling into composure once more. By mid-morning, Margot arrived. Umbrella tucked under one arm, a manila envelope clutched in the other. "I brought the notarized statements," Margot said, stepping inside without ceremony. 2 copies, mine and the witness version. Dates, times, signatures, all tidy. Ginny accepted them with a nod. "You're efficient." "Retirement leaves me plenty of hours to make mischief," Margot replied, her grin sharp. "How's the enemy front?" "Quiet," Ginny said. "Too quiet. She's trying on civility to see if it still fits." Margot chuckled. "Well, don't return the favor. Let her choke on it a while." They shared coffee at the patio table, the air thick with the sweet scent of jasmine. Margot's presence steadied Ginny, one of the few people who understood that revenge wasn't about spectacle, it was about symmetry. By afternoon, the sound of Tessa's heels echoed down the hallway. She appeared in the doorway of Ginny's suite, holding 2 mugs of coffee and a smile too polished to be sincere. "I thought we could talk," she began brightly. "About redefining boundaries." Ginny glanced up from her papers. "Redefining?" "Yes." Tessa set the mugs down with a little too much care. "This house has been tense lately, and I hate that. Maybe we could start fresh. No more legal stuff. Just family again." "Family," Ginny repeated softly, her pen still moving across the page. "That's an interesting word for people drafting relocation paperwork." Tessa flushed. "I said I was sorry. Maybe we can forget this ever happened." Ginny looked up, finally meeting her eyes. "Oh, I won't forget, Tessa. I'm just filing." Tessa frowned, uncertain if it was a joke. Ginny smiled. Cool, disarming, impossible to read. "Don't worry, dear. You'll know when the forgetting starts. It won't be mine." Tessa hesitated, her polished composure flickering. Then she left without another word, her heels tapping a retreat. The moment she was gone, Ginny opened her printer, slipped the freshly notarized statements inside, and hit print. The quiet whir of the machine filled the room. One copy for Jude, one for her records. When the last page slid out, she stacked them neatly, the ink still faintly warm. Outside, thunder rolled in the distance, soft, promising. The notice clock started ticking quietly. 60 days. No alarms, no confrontation. Just time, stretching out like a taut thread. Ginny marked the date in her planner with a clean blue circle, then closed it and slid it into her drawer. The next morning, she changed her locks. The guest suite door, the one that once stayed open as a gesture of family trust, now had a new keypad, one that beeped softly when programmed. Ginny set a fresh code, pressed confirm, and smiled as the lock clicked into place. Privacy, she murmured to herself, a long overdue amenity. Tessa noticed first. At breakfast, she tried to open the suite door, pushing lightly. It didn't budge. Ginny? Did this lock change? Ginny didn't look up from buttering her toast. It did. Why? Because I live there, Ginny said simply, folding her napkin. And I prefer my things secure. Tessa forced a laugh. You make it sound like we'd steal from you. Ginny looked at her over her glasses. I don't make it sound like anything. I just prefer facts over assumptions. The smile slipped from Tessa's face. That exchange set the tone for the next several weeks. Tessa's mood swung like a metronome, from honeyed attempts at reconciliation to sharp bursts of resentment. One day, she left a bouquet outside Ginny's door with a note, "Let's start over." The next morning, the kitchen echoed with her voice snapping. This passive-aggressive stuff is ridiculous, Eric. She's doing it on purpose. Eric tried to broker peace, walking into Ginny's suite one afternoon with the caution of a man approaching live wire. Mom, he began softly, maybe you could ease up? She's unraveling. Ginny gestured for him to sit. Eric, there's no war here. I've simply decided to stop being the unpaid help in my own house. It's remarkable how unsettling that is for some people. He sighed. You changed the locks. Yes. She feels shut out. Then perhaps she should stop standing on thresholds she didn't build. Eric rubbed the back of his neck, his voice lowering. She's scared you'll actually make us leave. Ginny studied him carefully, the boy she'd raised to be gentle. Now a man caught between women who both wanted the same thing: control. I don't want to make anyone leave, she said. I want peace. But peace doesn't come free. He nodded slowly, eyes down. You're serious about this? Ginny smiled faintly. I stopped joking around the same time she did. After he left, she picked up the phone and called Jude. Everything's documented, she said. The letter, the witness statements, the online post. Jude's voice came steady on the other end. I've reviewed it all, Virginia. Your documentation is flawless. You could win this in a heartbeat, even if it goes to court. I don't want court, she replied. I want clarity. Then you're already winning. That night, rain swept across Plano again, slicking the driveways and washing pollen from the sidewalks. Ginny sat at her desk, filing away each piece of evidence in her leather binder. Clause 37, pattern of hostility, notice of division. Every tab perfectly aligned. Then something softer. A piece of folded paper slid under her door. She bent to pick it up, smiling even before she opened it. Crayon lines filled the page in bold color. A red-roofed house, a green lawn, a swing set, and 2 stick figures holding hands. Beneath it, written in careful child handwriting, Grandma's house. Safe zone. Love, Callie. Ginny's throat tightened. She smoothed the paper flat on her desk, tracing the uneven hearts drawn around the edges. For all the pages of contracts and legal codes she'd collected, this one, this messy, innocent drawing, meant the most. She slid it into a fresh folder, labeling it neatly in blue ink. Legacy, real love. Her pen lingered a moment before she capped it. Outside, the storm broke with a deep rumble. The house creaked, the locks held, and for the first time in months, Ginny felt safe within her own walls. The Texas sun came back with vengeance after the week of rain, bleaching the lawns and flattening the air. The world looked ordinary again, but inside the Hale house, something irreversible had shifted. Ginny stood at the kitchen window, sipping coffee while the sound of lawnmowers hummed from down the block. Her phone buzzed against the counter, Jude's name lighting up the screen. She wiped her hand on a napkin before answering. "Morning, Virginia," he said, his tone businesslike but edged with satisfaction. "You'll like this. I double-checked your deed and filings. In Texas, title trumps relation. Every single time." Ginny smiled into her cup. "I thought so." "That means," Jude continued, "you don't need anyone's permission to formalize full ownership. It's just a matter of filing your claim of severance. The court date's already on the docket. But given your documentation, I don't think we'll even make it that far." Ginny's eyes drifted toward the staircase, where she could hear Tessa's voice floating down from the second floor, sharp, defensive, rehearsing an argument to no one. "Good," she said simply. "I prefer my victories quiet." Jude chuckled. "That's what I admire about you, Virginia. You play chess in a world full of checkers." She hung up feeling steadier than she had in years. The kettle clicked off behind her, the mundane sound of triumph. 3 days later, the sheriff's deputy appeared in a white cruiser, parking neatly by the curb. The envelope he delivered was thick and official, sealed in crisp legal blue. He handed it to Tessa personally, offering a polite nod before leaving her on the porch with it trembling in her hands. Ginny watched from her sitting room window, serene as a saint in stained glass. Tessa ripped it open right there, eyes scanning, mouth tightening. The color drained from her face. "Eric!" she shouted, voice cracking. "You need to see this." He came rushing down the stairs, hair mussed, tie half done. "What now?" She's taking everything. Look. It says full ownership transfer. It's notarized. And it says I have no standing." Eric took the papers, confusion twisting across his features. This can't be real." Ginny stepped out of her suite, calm and collected, holding her teacup as though she were arriving at a book club instead of a battle. "Oh, it's real," she said. Tessa spun toward her, eyes wild. "You can't just take the house, Ginny." "I can reclaim what's legally mine," Ginny corrected, which, as it turns out, is the house. "You're unbelievable," Tessa spat. "Who does this to family?" Ginny's tone was almost kind, someone who finally remembered she's not the help. Eric stepped between them, voice low and weary. "Mom, please, there has to be another way. We can't just—" Ginny cut him off gently. "There is another way." She reached into her folder and pulled out a document, crisp and clean, sliding it onto the counter. "A lease agreement, market rate, plus standard utilities." Eric blinked, staring down at it. "You're charging us rent?" Ginny gave him a small, knowing smile. "From help to landlord. Not a bad arc, don't you think?" Tessa's mouth fell open. "You're insane." "No," Ginny said softly. "I'm independent." Eric picked up the papers, scanning the lines. "This rent is higher than what we'd pay anywhere else in Plano." "I'm sure there are cheaper options," Ginny replied evenly. "But then, this isn't just anywhere else. This is my home." He looked at her, his mother, steady as marble, and then at Tessa, whose fury was unraveling into panic. "You want me to pay you to live here? I want you to choose where you belong," Ginny said. "With her, with me, or somewhere entirely your own. But I won't carry both of you anymore." The silence that followed was deep enough to feel physical. Only the hum of the refrigerator filled the void. Tessa grabbed her purse and stormed out, slamming the front door hard enough to rattle the picture frames. Eric stood in the stillness she left behind, staring at the lease papers. Then slowly, he folded them. "Mom," he said quietly, "I can't make her sign it." "I know," Ginny replied, "but you can decide what's fair." He looked at her for a long moment, his eyes tired, resigned. Then he turned toward the staircase. "Callie and I will stay with her sister for a few nights, maybe longer." Ginny's throat tightened, but her voice stayed calm. "Take your time. I'll make sure your things are safe." He hesitated at the door, as if searching for words that didn't exist, then left without another glance. The house went silent again, except for the faint tick of the kitchen clock and the creak of settling wood. Ginny exhaled slowly, walking to the window. The sunset was bleeding across the sky, gold melting into crimson. She lifted her tea, took a slow sip, and whispered, "From help to home." By mid-April, the Hale driveway looked like an estate sale. Boxes stacked beside suitcases, furniture wrapped in clear plastic, and a single framed family photo sitting face down on the passenger seat of Tessa's Lexus. Ginny watched from her kitchen window, tea steaming in her hand, expression unreadable. Tessa barked orders at the movers like a CEO of chaos, snapping, pacing, occasionally glancing back toward the house but never toward the window where Ginny stood. There was no goodbye. When the last box was gone, the silence hit like a tide going out. The house seemed to exhale. Even the walls, long suffocated by tension and perfume, felt looser somehow, like they could breathe again. Later that afternoon, Eric came by alone. His shirt was wrinkled, his eyes rimmed red. He didn't come inside right away. He stood in the doorway, looking like a man both too old and too young for his life. "I just wanted to say—" His voice cracked, the words fraying apart. Ginny didn't move closer, didn't rescue him from the pause. He looked down, pulled a folded note from his pocket, and set it on the entry table. "I'm sorry," he said softly. "For all of it." She nodded once. "Take care of Callie." He met her eyes, the same shade of soft blue he'd inherited from her. "She misses you already." "I know." He turned, hesitated like he might hug her, then didn't. When the door clicked shut behind him, the house went still again. But this time, it didn't feel lonely. It felt hers. That weekend, the court documents came through, custody stipulations finalized. Callie would spend every other weekend and one evening each week with Ginny. Grandparent visitation, the court called it. Ginny called it sanity. The first Friday evening, Callie came bounding through the front door, backpack bouncing, pigtails crooked. "Grandma, guess what? Daddy says I get to stay here 2 whole nights." Ginny knelt, catching her in an embrace that smelled of apple shampoo and playground dust. "Well then," she said smiling, 2 nights means pancakes twice." They spent the evening making a mess in the kitchen. Flour on the floor, blueberries rolling under the fridge, Callie's laughter ringing bright through every room that used to echo. When the child finally fell asleep on the couch, surrounded by stuffed animals and soft lamplight, Ginny looked around and whispered, "Welcome home." The next morning, Margot showed up in paint-splattered overalls, 2 rollers slung over her shoulder like rifles. "You ready to exercise that beige out of here?" she asked. Ginny grinned. "Let's give this place a pulse again." They worked side by side in the living room, the scent of fresh paint thick and clean. Pale blue rolled onto the walls. Cool, serene, deliberate. The color her late husband used to call Sunday calm. "Looks like a new start," Margot said, dipping her roller again. "Not new," Ginny corrected softly. "Just reclaimed." They laughed, shared coffee, and admired the soft light refracting off the wet paint. For the first time in years, the house didn't feel like someone else's stage. It felt like home, the kind built by survival, not approval. By the following week, Jude finalized the last of the paperwork. He handed her a single sheet over lunch at a quiet cafe downtown. Filed and sealed. As of today, Virginia Hale is the sole title holder of 204 Madison Hollow Lane. Ginny studied the page. Her name, alone, looked so dignified, so final. "Congratulations," Jude said, smiling. "You're free." She took a sip of tea. "Freedom's such a simple word for something so expensive." He chuckled. "You earned every penny of it." When she returned home, the spring wind carried the smell of new-cut grass. She stood on the porch for a long time, letting the sunlight touch her face before heading inside. The house greeted her with silence, but this time, it was peaceful. Her peace. She set down her purse, walked to the router in the corner, and logged in with the small satisfaction of someone rewriting her own story. Her fingers hovered briefly before typing the new Wi-Fi name, not the help. The cursor blinked for a second, then confirmed the change. Ginny smiled, leaning back in her chair, the hum of the modem like a small private victory song. The house had a new rhythm now. Quiet, deliberate, and hers. Mornings came softly through the pale blue walls, sunlight cutting through the curtains like thin gold ribbons. The air smelled faintly of lemon polish and lavender again, not because she had to, but because she wanted to. Ginny sat at her writing desk that Saturday morning, a stack of folders neatly arranged to her left. The thick leather binder lay open, its spine creased from months of quiet preparation. She wasn't sorting evidence anymore. She was preserving history. On the first page, she placed a clean sheet of stationery titled Timeline 2018-2025. Her handwriting was patient, deliberate. She started at the beginning. The year she helped build the house. The life insurance check. The title split she hadn't questioned. Then the small indignities. The help comment. The laughter. The party. She listed the first legal draft, the clause discovery, the notice of severance. The paper filled quickly, line after line, not with bitterness, but with precision. Each entry told its own story of endurance disguised as politeness. Next, she slid in copies of every key document: the joint ownership deed, the severance clause, the property division filing, even screenshots of Tessa's posts. They were flattened beneath protective sleeves, sealed with quiet finality. For the last section, she wrote a heading, Personal Addendum. Under it, she tucked Callie's crayon drawing, Grandma's House, Safe Zone. She pressed it gently, smoothing the wrinkles. The edges were worn now from how many times she'd looked at it. Then she reached for a yellow sticky note, wrote in her looping script, and affixed it to the top page. For Callie. When she asks. It wasn't a will. It was a map. By late afternoon, the binder was complete. It sat on the desk like something alive, a record of quiet warfare fought without raising a voice. A soft knock came at the open patio door. "You're still cataloging?" Ginny smiled. Margot stood there, holding a mason jar of sweet tea and 2 lemon cookies balanced on top. "You always bring sugar when you think I need it." "You always need it," Margot replied, easing herself into the chair across from her. "You've been holed up in here like a librarian with secrets." Ginny turned the binder toward her. "Not secrets, documentation. I wanted it all in one place before memory starts rearranging the details." Margot flipped through the pages slowly, pausing on the screenshots and notarized stamps. "You really did it, didn't you? You built something they didn't even see." Ginny looked toward the living room. At the blue walls, the sunlight slanting across the rug. "I built it twice," she said quietly. "Once for them, then again for myself." Margot smiled faintly. And this time, it stayed standing. They sat in companionable silence, the kind that only comes after storms pass. Outside, cicadas started their slow hum as the sky deepened to dusk. When Margot left, Ginny stayed seated a while longer. She reached for a small box on her bookshelf. Inside it, a half-used candle, white wax scented with bergamot and cedar. It had been a gift from Tessa, the tag still faintly visible, for the world's most helpful mother-in-law. Ginny peeled the label off. Then she struck a match. The wick caught easily, flame licking upward, releasing a soft, clean scent into the room. She set it beside the binder, watching the wax pool and shimmer. She took a deep breath, the kind that fills a house, a chest, a life that's finally her own. When the candle burned steady, she whispered to the quiet, "Every name on every line matters." The binder gleamed under the lamplight, the word Hale embossed in silver on the cover. The house was hers again, and this time her story had a paper trail. The knock came just after 9 on a Sunday morning, a quiet, hesitant rhythm. Not the impatient rattle of delivery drivers or Margot's confident 3-tap pattern. Ginny looked up from her kitchen table. Her coffee sat untouched, steam thinning into the air. Outside, the light was gray, the kind that made everything seem paused. Another knock, softer this time. She stood, smoothing the front of her cardigan before walking to the door. Through the frosted glass, she saw a silhouette. Small, tense, arms wrapped around itself. When she opened it, she found Tessa standing there. No makeup, no mask, no performance. Her hair was unbrushed, pulled into a careless knot. The sharp polish that had once defined her was gone, replaced by something hollow and tired. "Ginny," she said. Her voice wasn't loud, but it trembled just enough to sound human again. Ginny didn't step aside. The doorway was wide, but she made it smaller by standing firm in it. "Tessa." For a moment, they both stood in silence, the only sound the wind brushing through the newly painted shutters. Tessa looked past Ginny's shoulder, at the familiar walls, the living room she'd once called hers. Her throat bobbed. She swallowed. "I came to say it was just a joke." Ginny's face didn't move. "So is this," she said quietly. "Just a legal one." Tessa blinked, her lips parting in disbelief. "You can't possibly think all of this was about one comment." Ginny tilted her head slightly. "Of course not. It was about a lifetime of small ones." Tessa's arms tightened around herself. "You didn't have to make it this ugly." Ginny studied her, the lines around her eyes soft but unyielding. "You started ugly," she said. "I finished legally." The words hung between them, clean and cold. For a second, Tessa looked as if she might cry, or shout. But instead, her shoulders slumped, her eyes glancing down at the porch floorboards she hadn't stood on in months. "Eric's still trying to make sense of it," she said after a pause. "He blames himself." "He should," Ginny replied evenly, "but he'll learn from it. People do when they lose something they thought was permanent." Tessa's chin trembled. "And what about Callie? She keeps asking why we can't come home." Ginny's hand tightened on the doorframe. "She is home. When she's here." "That's not what I meant." "I know." The wind shifted. Somewhere down the block, a car door slammed. Life continued, indifferent. Tessa looked up again, her voice brittle. "You're enjoying this, aren't you?" Ginny let out a quiet, almost maternal sigh. "No, but I am savoring the peace that comes after respect is restored." She stepped half a pace forward, still not yielding the doorway. "You mistook my silence for weakness, Tessa. It's a common error. I recommend you don't make it again. With anyone." Tessa's eyes flashed, that familiar pride surfacing for just a second before shame pushed it down. "You really believe you're the hero in this?" Ginny's lips curved faintly. Heroes clean up after other people's messes. I simply stopped volunteering. They stood there, two women who had once shared a kitchen, a family, a brittle kind of civility that had finally shattered. Tessa glanced past her again, at the blue walls, the framed photos, the faint glow of the candle Ginny had lit that morning. For a moment, her face softened, almost wistful. "You win," she said quietly. Ginny didn't blink. "No, Tessa. I kept what was mine." The younger woman let out a shaky breath and stepped back. "I hope you're happy." "I am," Ginny said, her tone calm and final. "And that's what bothers you most." Tessa turned without another word. The gravel crunched under her shoes as she walked toward her car. Ginny watched her go, the distance growing with every step. Inside, the untouched coffee sat cooling on the counter. Ginny lifted it, took a single sip, then poured the rest down the sink. She didn't need the warmth anymore. The house had enough of it now. The sky over Plano was the kind of blue that looks rinsed clean, cool, endless, honest. Ginny sat at her desk again, her leather binder open to a new section labeled Estate Planning, Final Revision. The candle she'd lit earlier had burned down to a stub, its faint cedar scent clinging to the air like a benediction. Her pen hovered above the page as she read the top line of the document Jude had sent that morning. Last Will and Testament of Virginia Elaine Hale. A chill moved through her. Not fear, not sadness, but a solemn satisfaction. She'd spent her life keeping things tidy. It was only right that the ending should be neat too. Jude's typed clauses were precise, even elegant. The second page carried the new paragraph she'd asked for. Written in plain, deliberate language, I name my granddaughter, Callie June Hale, sole heir to my estate and all accompanying assets. Inheritance is to be delayed until she reaches 25 years of age and is found to be uninfluenced by external parties or financial manipulation. Ginny read that line twice, then smiled. "You'll get this house when you're old enough to know what it's worth," she murmured. Outside, a robin hopped along the lawn where weeds used to creep unchecked. The world beyond her windows had grown quiet, patient, the way she liked it. When Jude arrived that afternoon, he brought a briefcase, a thermos of black coffee, and the air of a man closing a long case. "Everything's ready," he said, setting the folder down on her desk. "Once we sign, it's official. Ironclad, airtight, and unbreakable. They'll never touch it." Ginny looked up from her chair, her expression serene. "Good." "I'd hate to leave loose ends for people who prefer to tug on them," Jude chuckled. "Margot's coming to witness?" She wouldn't miss it. As if on cue, Margot appeared through the side gate, wearing her sun hat and carrying a pen she'd brought from her own notary days. "Let's make some history," she said, setting down her thermos beside Jude's. The three of them sat at the kitchen table, sunlight spilling across the polished surface. Ginny signed her name, steady, looping, unhurried, on each page. Margot initialed every witness line, eyes sharp behind her glasses. Jude notarized the final seal with a soft click that sounded more final than any gavel. "There," Jude said. "One signature at a time, you've rewritten your whole story." Ginny looked at the embossed seal and exhaled. "No," she said quietly. "I just finished it." Margot smiled, touching her hand. "You're leaving her something better than money, you know. You're leaving her an example." Ginny nodded, eyes warm but distant. "I'm leaving her a map." Later that afternoon, Ginny slipped into her garden gloves and stepped outside. The air carried that faint, sweet promise of spring. The patch of driveway where Tessa used to park stood bare, the concrete pale and unremarkable. She knelt beside it, pressing her hand against the cool surface, then picked up her trowel. From a small tray beside her, she lifted 3 rosebush saplings, deep red, the variety her husband used to plant along their first home's fence. She dug carefully, methodically, setting each root in the soil, packing it firm. When the last one was in, she brushed her hands clean on her jeans and whispered, "New things grow where pride used to park." The wind caught the words and carried them, scattering petals from a nearby camellia. Inside, the binder lay open to its last page, Ginny's personal entry written in smooth, confident ink. Final journal entry, April 28th, 2025. She asked for help. I gave her a map. Out. Callie will ask someday what happened here. I'll let the paperwork answer. Truth looks better stamped and signed. Peace earned quietly still counts as peace. Ginny closed the binder, her fingers lingering on the silver lettering of her name. Virginia Hale, she whispered, testing the sound of it in the silence. Not mom, not mother-in-law, not the help. Just herself. She walked through the house slowly, each room humming with faint music from her radio, a playlist of old country songs her husband used to whistle along to. When she reached the front door, she paused to look out at the roses, the first buds already trembling in the breeze. Behind her, the scent of burnt cedar still lingered faintly, curling upward like a prayer. The first Saturday of summer came with the kind of warmth that makes the air shimmer above the sidewalks. Plano was alive again. Sprinklers hissing, dogs barking, the faint hum of lawnmowers echoing down cul-de-sacs. Ginny stood barefoot on her porch, the hem of her linen pants brushing against her ankles. A small box of metal brackets sat open beside her, along with a brand new porch swing, the exact one Callie had circled in a catalog 2 months earlier. "Grandma, can I pick the color of the cushions?" Callie's voice chirped from the doorway, sticky with popsicle sugar. "Of course," Ginny said, tightening one of the bolts. "But if you pick pink, you're washing it." "Blue," Callie grinned, "like the living room." "Smart girl," Ginny murmured, smiling to herself. When the swing was finally assembled, Ginny gave it a gentle push. It swayed smoothly, creaking once, like the house itself exhaling. She sat beside her granddaughter, the chain groaning softly under their weight. The breeze smelled faintly of roses, the ones blooming along the driveway where Tessa used to park. Callie leaned her head on her grandmother's shoulder. "It feels like it's always been here." Ginny looked out over the yard at the trimmed grass, the sunlight flickering through oak leaves. "That's how you know something belongs," she said softly. "It feels like it was waiting." By the following week, the town's newsletter had caught wind of her quiet resurgence. "Local retiree donates time to library's reading program," it read, beneath a picture of Ginny in a denim jacket, surrounded by first graders. The Plano Public Library smelled of paper, crayons, and lemon disinfectant. Every Tuesday morning, she sat in a circle of children, her voice low and melodic as she read from Charlotte's Web. "Do you know why Charlotte helped Wilbur?" she asked one morning. A boy raised his hand. "Because he was scared?" Ginny smiled. "Because she saw something worth saving, even if he didn't." The children listened, spellbound, as she turned each page with the careful rhythm of someone who'd learned the cost of time. Margot would sometimes meet her afterward, leaning against the library's brick wall with 2 iced teas. "You're a local celebrity," she teased one morning. "Legend status." Ginny chuckled, taking a sip. "Quiet legends leave loud shadows." "Yours is practically a thundercloud," Margot said, laughing. "Half the neighborhood whispers your name like you're a ghost story with good taste." Ginny tilted her head, amused. "Then I'll haunt them politely." The two women walked down the sidewalk together, the Texas sun bouncing off car hoods. People waved. Parents, retirees, even the mailman who always used to rush past. Respect had replaced pity. Acknowledgement had replaced gossip. Word had traveled through the HOA, the PTA, the book club circles. Virginia Hale, the widow who'd been mistaken for the help, had become the woman who owned everything but bragged about nothing. That evening, Ginny sat on the swing again, alone this time. The sun was setting in streaks of coral and amber, the porch light flickering on automatically. Across the street, a teenager played guitar in his garage. Fireflies blinked above the roses. Inside, her phone vibrated once. A notification. She glanced down. Tessa Hale has unfollowed you. Ginny stared at it for a long second, then chuckled under her breath. Took her long enough, she said, and deleted the alert. A few minutes later, another notification appeared. A message from Eric. Mom, Callie keeps asking about you. I told her we'll come by this weekend. I'd like that too. She smiled at the screen, her heart softening in the way only motherhood could allow. Doors always open, Eric. Same code as before. She set the phone aside and leaned back into the swing, her body swaying gently with the rhythm of the crickets. The stars began to appear, faint pinpricks of light against the fading sky. Somewhere down the block, a screen door slammed and laughter carried through the warm air. Ginny closed her eyes, listening to the sounds of the street, the neighborhood she'd once felt invisible in, now humming in harmony with her quiet peace. She didn't think of Tessa anymore, or even of the fight, only of what remained. Her house, her garden, her granddaughter's laughter echoing down the hallway like a promise that nothing built from love could ever really be taken. Morning came slow, golden and soft, the kind of morning Plano only gives to those who've earned their peace. Ginny stepped out onto the porch with her coffee, the air crisp and still carrying a whisper of night. She walked the perimeter of her yard the way some people walk prayer circles, deliberate, reverent, claiming every inch. The dew sparkled on the grass, collecting at the tips of the roses she'd planted where Tessa's Lexus once stood. The blooms were heavy now, full-bodied and unapologetically alive. Her slippers brushed against the flagstone path as she moved past the garden beds, pausing to pull one stray weed near the walkway. A single bird, a mockingbird, always the loudest, sang from the oak branch above the swing. This was her ritual now, coffee in hand, slow inspection of the land she owned outright. Her land, her rules. She paused at the edge of the driveway, looking toward the mailbox where, once upon a time, Tessa's monogrammed envelopes used to arrive in neat cursive. Bills she'd insisted on signing Mrs. Hale as though ink could erase origin. Now the only letters that came bore Ginny's name and hers alone. Inside, the house waited in its gentle silence, clean, calm. Fully hers. The faint scent of lemon oil still lingered from last night's dusting. Sunlight warmed the new blue walls of the living room. The old family photos had been rearranged. Callie's school picture front and center, the others spaced carefully around it like supporting cast. On the coffee table lay Callie's newest drawing, left after her last weekend visit. This one showed the house again, but with more detail than before. The swing, the rose bushes, the smiling stick figure labeled Grandma. In bright purple crayon, Callie had written across the top, Grandma's house. Safe zone. Ginny traced the letters with one fingertip. Her throat tightened, not from sadness but from the quiet certainty of legacy. The phone buzzed on the table, breaking the stillness. It was a text from Jude. Filed this morning. All successors named. All exits final. Congratulations, Ms. Hale. Ginny smiled as she typed her reply. Thank you, Jude. Now I can finally stop filing and start living. Setting the phone aside, she poured herself another cup of coffee and looked around her living room. Not a speck out of place, not a sound that didn't belong. The house hummed like it was breathing with her. A knock came a few minutes later. Light. Familiar. Doors open, Ginny called. Margot stepped in, carrying a foil-covered dish and her usual sly smile. Thought I'd bring something before the library crowd steals you again. Cornbread. Hot. Ginny laughed softly. You're going to spoil me. Someone has to, Margot said, setting the dish on the counter. How's it feel? No tenants? No drama? No ghosts? Ginny poured her friend a cup of coffee. Feels like a house finally learned who owns it. Margot grinned. To good endings, then. They sat at the table, the morning light spilling across the wood like honey. Margot tore off a corner of cornbread, steam curling into the air. You know, she said between bites. People in the neighborhood still talk about it. How you managed to win that war without raising your voice once. Ginny shrugged. I just stopped fighting battles that weren't mine. Margot laughed. You say that like it's easy? Ginny looked toward the window, watching the roses nod in the gentle wind. Nothing about it was easy. That's why it was worth it. They finished breakfast in companionable silence. When Margot left, the screen door closed softly behind her, and Ginny was alone again. But it was the good kind of alone, the earned kind. She carried her cup back to the sink, rinsing it under warm water, humming an old tune her husband used to whistle. From the corner of her eye, she caught her reflection in the window, a woman unburdened, at home in her own story. Outside, the swing creaked once in the wind, swaying gently as if remembering laughter. Ginny turned off the faucet, wiped her hands on a towel, and stood still for a long moment, just listening to the quiet heartbeat of the house. No footsteps overhead, no clipped tone calling her name, no pretense left to manage, only calm. She reached for the kettle on the stove, filled it halfway, and set it on to boil. The whistle rose softly a few minutes later, and she smiled at the sound. How something so small could feel like a victory song. Her tea steeped quietly as she took her place by the window, looking out over the roses glowing in the sunlight. Every loose end tied, every exit signed, every lesson earned. Ginny exhaled, her reflection framed by the home she'd built, lost, and rebuilt again. My DIL said I was just the help, so I helped her find a new address.